All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Craig Swensrud. I'm the founder and CEO of Qualified, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by a very special guest, Bill Patterson, the EVP of Corporate Strategy at Salesforce is here. Bill, welcome to the AI SDR Summit.
Craig, thank you for having me. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. So in the next 20 minutes, as we kind of lead off in this keynote, we're going to discuss the state of the union and how digital labor is entering the workforce in 2025. Obviously, something that Salesforce has a strong perspective on. You know, you guys have been a pioneer in AI technology for over a decade. I think it was 2014 that you first introduced Einstein and predictive artificial intelligence within the enterprise. So can you give us some perspective on kind of the waves of enterprise AI that Salesforce has predicted, and where are we at right now with agentic AI?
Yeah, I love to think about, kind of the purpose and mission of Salesforce and why sort of AI sort of meant so much to our customers to bring it into that everyday application experience. Like our heritage has always been about making the job easier for sellers, for service professionals, for marketers. And so even back to our core, Salesforce automation was really about how to make this around an easier experience. And so back in 2013, 2014, we brought in Einstein. Einstein was really about bringing AI into the flow of work, but the kind of AI that we're talking about there was using the power of machine learning and predictive intelligence to really get data to then forecast, kind of what to do next and sort of an everyday kind of experience. And then we sort of saw this generative movement happen, right? What ChatGPT brought into the world and what we kind of saw around sort of the transformer model sort of entering into space. This is where you now start to see like the AI can work really on behalf and start to generate value really as I sort of use it. And so that co-pilot era that we really saw really around 2 years ago was how kind of productivity started to like create value in the moments of interactions. And I think then we started to now like think, going beyond just sort of like human in the loop kind of technology, how do we start using agents that can really work with users on behalf of users and then sort of make just sort of work transform altogether? That's kind of the era that we're in right now. And I think this sort of mission between the predictive era, the generative era, the agentic era, that's where a lot of organizations sort of find themselves today. I think all of this is in grand spirit of, kind of going to a world of AGI, which I think is in 2019, we thought that was like 80 years into the future. Right. We think that's going to happen faster now, right? And so I think this is going to be a great case where all of this great technology to serve businesses to really help them perform better. I think that's been the, what excites us so much about this moment.
Well, it is incredibly exciting on the road to AGI. I mean, you guys have really been at the forefront with predictive and generative and co-pilots. And now, as you say, we're squarely in this world of autonomous agents and agentic AI. I think that's the term of the year. So here we are in 2025, and we're talking about digital labor, right? So Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, has stated, this is the last generation of CEOs that's going to manage a purely human workforce. So here we are, we got a digital workforce coming in to work alongside the human workforce. How do you envision that actually happens? What does that collaborative future sort of look like where humans and AI are working side by side?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question, and I think it comes up in every single one of my customer engagements I had today, which is, what does that sort of look like? And I think at this time, it really puts businesses back to the foundations of kind of their values. And for us at Salesforce, trust, just like in your organization, Craig, trust is our number one value. And so you have to be able to trust that agents are going to do, kind of work well with humans and work well on, to actually get the job done that we do. We can't have it hallucinating, especially in a world of customer relationships. Can't have it hallucinating sort of responses if that's actually not how the business is choosing to operate, for themselves. And so trust is sort of at the foundation of all of this digital labor movement. And I do think our two organizations really speak to that quite well for the companies that we kind of work with. I do think, really that the collaborative style of what agents are really becoming are really putting a new trust equation to really make sure that as a user, I'm getting value from that. I work with 80 something agents here at Salesforce. I have a sales agent, I have a research agent, I have a competitor agent that are all kind of working to give me great insights. And it's just making sure that data is not only trusted, but it's also really helping me in the moment I need it to get a task done around my job. So I do think this is the last era that you won't have just sort of human labor performing those tasks. I think you'll have agentic labor that's actually performing that function for me. helps me, kind of be more productive, helps me sort of get what I need in the moment, and is always available, even whatever hour I'm working, in a day. And so I definitely think this is going to be something that, as trust sort of enters in the equation, every employee is going to have to sort of learn to work comfortably with this great new technology.
You guys have always said it really well that trust is the currency of business. And now we have this new agentic digital labor who's coming into our enterprises. And of course, we have to have trust. But in 2024 was really the year where, as software companies and industry visionaries, people were talking about agents, autonomous agents. And I think everybody was inspired by what was possible, but it left a lot of us kind of scratching our heads because we had trouble understanding, well, what do you mean exactly? Where do I start? And so you guys have been really great because you guys have been preaching the use cases. And I think you've got a whole page on your website that just talks about agentic use cases within the enterprise. And I think that when I was reading that page, I'm like, oh my God, like the light bulb is kind of turning on going, I get it. I see how I can bring these agents into not just specific departments, but like either job functions or tasks. So can you tell me which areas, in your opinion, of an organization are going to benefit kind of first from this first wave of digital labor transformation?
Yeah, this is such an exciting time because for so many companies and so many organizations, human labor and the constraint of human labor has been sort of the barrier for them to do more or to sort of transform their organization. And so when we sort of work with our customers, we're really kind of asking the deepest questions. Where do you find the biggest amount of constraint? And where do you find constraint today to always be available for your customers, always be available for, kind of service use cases, sales use cases, et cetera. So let me give you a few. Customer service is one of the best places where agents can sort of, kind of operationalize more elastic engagement for your company. And we've always sort of seen customer service utilize technologies for things like deflection and sort of, instead of having to take a phone call, maybe I can answer that question through a website metaphor. Well, now it's not about deflection in customer service. It's about really enriching that engagement. So not only do I answer your question, how do I curate that into now an area to make you aware of what else we can sort of add value to? And that's what agents really do well, is understand not just your intent to solve the question that you asked, but also to know the relationship with that customer to sort of invoke more time and time on site with the customer you're serving. Commerce, another great use case. Not just sort of help me buy a product today, but also make me available what else is in your inventory that I might have interest in. And so that's why, things like, areas that are not just sort of about like the one and done interaction anymore, using these agentic experiences to sort of pull you into new funnels of engagement and new funnels of opportunity are immensely, powerful. And then finally, what you guys do, the whole area of sales development and business development, really using the power of information and through a curated sort of interaction model to pull you into that funnel. What an immense opportunity for us to use the power of like great innovation like you're creating and platforms like Salesforce to back that solution to help you kind of sell more effectively. And sell more, no matter what time of day or what kind of region that you're kind of doing business in. These agents are just so powerful in that regard.
I think that use cases are where it's at right now because that's how people tend to understand what the agents can do. I love that you're focused on customer service. That was the first use case you said, because you're right. In these call centers, traditionally, it was about deflecting away from humans, right? And so it was like, nope, don't call the call center. Go on the website and figure it out. And what did we all do in that phone tree? We were screamed into the phone, human, right? But now it's going to be like, no, they're not going to try to deflect. They're going to try to like funnel that to agents because the agent can perform this ability as well, or in many cases better than a human at a cost that's far superior. So that's a killer use case. Commerce, as you said, I think is a great use case, but we're here at the AI SDR Summit. And I think this is obviously another great use case, pipeline generation for companies in the form of sales development. So let's go a little bit deeper on kind of the AI SDR agent movement. And, given your role, you're the EVP of corporate strategy at Salesforce. You're super in tune with the needs of a go-to-market organization. I think that goes without saying. You mentioned that SDRs are a natural place for digital labor to kind of come into the enterprise. Like, What is it specifically, in your opinion, about this role that makes it more ideal as a place to start with digital labor and AI agents versus maybe, obviously, customer support is obvious. This one is obvious, but what is it about kind of this function that makes it so obvious relative to others?
I think for many organizations, let's say, kind of how it used to be. I'm always sort of like at this from to kind of shift way of thinking, but how it used to be is the SDR function was oftentimes sort of the first, kind of job a sales professional might take within an organization. And it's often sometimes the cheapest labor like pool that you have in sort of your sales organization at large. And that's how a lot of organizations have sort of planned to build their sales team is how do I bring kind of my new energy and this new sort of employee base into that function. What I think is sort of really fascinating is now organizations are actually finding kind of digital SDRs to be more effective ways of selling and actually more effective ways of sort of curating the funnel and bringing you through that funnel with velocity, bringing you through that with more predictability and not having sort of that cherry picking moment because these digital labor and digital workers can actually handle more volume than humans can in an 8-hour workday, right? And so 40% of leads today in most organizations actually go untouched completely because there's just not enough hours in the day for you to try and make that outbound call and outbound outreach and outbound sort of email to go out, from an interaction flow. So what used to be sort of like the cheapest way to sort of like curate the funnel is actually in a digital way now becoming a more effective way to drive the funnel. And I think that now what organizations, who are approaching it only from a labor economic standpoint, where they want to hire cheaper labor, are actually saying, you know what, it's actually more important for me to think about more effective labor here. And so I think this is sort of the kind of thing that, again, sales teams are going to completely remake the complexion of the organization where all of that function is like really digitally enabled. That what gets through the actual funnel and is more qualified, if you will, does need now more of a human touch so that you can now have that assistance with the actual, kind of reps that maybe come out and visit you on site. It's a complete way to kind of change the velocity of a selling force. And I'm so excited that I think you guys are taking a pioneering role to help with that thesis, to help marketers and sales teams, become more effective with each other.
I think you like hit the nail on the head. It's an obvious place to be more effective and an easy place to start. So a human SDR team, you mentioned they're kind of like at the beginning of their journey on, to become a sales professional. But when you add up a team of human SDRs, it's often hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. But let's say that's not the primary issue, which of course we know cost is always an issue. Capacity is always a concern. Speed and the fact that people can only work on one thing at a time is concerned. These young professionals who, let's call it like it is, they're a couple months on the job and they don't know our industry and our market and our products, and they can't really answer the right questions in the right way. And then if they're really good, they leave and they get promoted, right? And so we're constantly backfilling, constantly churning over these individuals, and we're like, man, we can do better. I was talking to a company in Southern California, a big healthcare company, and they said, for example, they just missed 1,400 inbound chat requests on their website from their ICP buyers because they didn't have the capacity. And then there was a great story of CMOs from Dreamforce who are like, I can't get my team to follow up with the Dreamforce leads. And we're like, why? And it's because like they just don't have the time to, do those kind of like higher up the funnel follow-ups. And you're like, man, there's so much opportunity that we're missing. This is a very, very logical place to start for so many reasons. So let's kind of look ahead for a second. And we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of companies who've already adopted AI SDR agents. Many of them are tuning into this program here today. And this technology, it's like only been in market for about a year. And so I always say inside of my company, like the AI years are like dog years. We've only lived a year, but it feels like we've progressed in our industry like 7 years. So from your perspective and your vantage point, which is really strategic, you see the market as a whole. You're kind of in the top ranks at Salesforce and you see so many different things that many of us don't see. How quickly do you think organizations are going to be adopting AI SDR agents within their go-to-market teams? Is this something that CMOs and CROs need to be thinking about now? Can it wait till next year? We're all wondering, like, how fast do we need? It feels like we're moving fast, but how fast do we need to move? What do you think the adoption rate should be? And what would be kind of your message to C-level execs in the go-to-market?
Yeah, I think, well, first off, if you're not investing, in these digital roles and digital worker functions, you're already really far behind. And I think that the other sort of truth of it is that when you cannot just sort of buy this off the rack, off the shelf, and just make it work, and it just turns on, and instantly all of a sudden you have a seasoned, kind of digital worker role. It takes time for these digital workers to be trained and sort of be curated and to be iterated with, where they actually go from kind of like a digital intern almost then to a digital professional. So that is a pathway, like you said, in dog years, that you have to start working now. Start small, start curating kind of these experiences and have a big vision for where it can go. But you're never going to achieve and realize that vision unless you sort of are acting today. And I think that's definitely true for most organizations. A lot of companies, when they invest in these technical moments, fail to really kind of get things into production because maybe they try and bite off more they can chew. I really think these sort of task-based, function-based, use case-based sort of agents are the place to start. And I think that's sort of like the first thing I would say strategically is, let the tactic drive your strategy. Get it live, get it in production, get it so it's actually interacting with your customers, and then bring them on that journey too, and let them know like, hey, in your case, like Piper's now driving the funnel for us, and that allows you to sort of now let companies start to engage with these new agents and new technology like never before. And I think that's sort of where we are now. What I do think, a lot of CEOs need to sort of understand is it goes back to something we were just talking about, Craig, where labor pools are not getting bigger; they're actually getting smaller. It's really hard to find, qualified professionals to perform these tasks, and so where organizations sort of have to start thinking about the complexion of their workforces into the future is one where what is going to be human bound, and what is going to now be digitally, sort of driven. And that is where, as you think about kind of labor populations in every geography around the world is a shrinking labor sort of market. The only way for companies to sort of compete and to grow and to scale are going to be by tapping into sort of these great moments. And so that the tactical nature and the strategic nature sort of have to meet in the, somewhere. And I do think that CEOs, the C-suite, has to start thinking now about like what do we do now so we can secure our future.
I think your perspective is so great, Bill, about you getting started with something small. Don't bite off more than you can chew, because this is a moment in time, and I liken it to what you all pioneered at Salesforce around cloud computing. It's a major platform shift, and we haven't seen a major platform shift in like 20 years. Yeah. So here we are again, and C-level executives are like, maybe I should wait a year till things get firmed up and there's like blueprints and playbooks. And, obviously we saw in the cloud revolution that the companies that got started the fastest on their journey were in the pole position to compete, to dominate their market. They were more effective. They were more productive. And so here we are at another one of these major platform shifts. But I kind of want to end on this question of organizational transformation, because that seems to be what's really hard. I have teams of humans. I'm bringing on digital labor. What does my org chart look like? How do I shift things? Or my processes are going to have to change. The workflows and that change, as we all know, is scary. So final question, what advice would you have for these leaders about driving internal change management in their organization for this future of digital labor and AI SDRs?
Yeah, I've always believed that your structure of your organization is sort of reflective of the strategy of that you're sort of trying to execute, and even the operations that you sort of execute that with. Back to sort of the meta question you're asking is, what does the organization need to prepare for change? It's fundamentally asking, kind of questions going back to the core of what matters most, like where are the value added processes and experiences that need to really be where our people do their best work, where it's highly emotive, where it is highly adaptive, where it is, really personal ways of engaging. But a lot of those sort of processes that are scalable functions and maybe are, commoditized functions of a business can be digitized. And I think that allows organizations to think about how can we kind of streamline the operations using digital functions and then using human, kind of labor to really become like kind of that sweetener and that value add on top. That's where I think organizations have to have the thesis, okay, this is how we're going to operate in the future. And you have to bring our humans along for that journey to understand they matter. Because I think some people that are very skeptical, like a lot of employers are like, look, am I training my digital replacement here? No, you're not creating your digital replacement. You're actually allowing digital to take on some of the lower value but higher volume tasks. Whereas you as a worker are really special, and now you're really going to be able to do your best work, for the future of the organization that way. So as you think about the change management, it's bringing your employees along the journey. It's sort of having a vision for, how to streamline, but also how to simplify a lot of that task. And then organizationally, I think that really goes back to something you're saying, which I have a lot of passion for. How do you just fundamentally rethink the process? Because so many of these processes that we see in companies today were just digitized versions of how we did it before. Now I think there's a real moment to rethink that altogether, really to do what's right for your customers and your companies, and really kind of what makes your organization unique.
Well, 2025 is the moment. Salesforce is famous for saying the only constant in our industry is change. And now is that moment. In 2025, all of our organizations have to change for this agentic AI movement that we're seeing, and AI SDR agents is the topic du jour. I want to thank our special guest, EVP of Corporate Strategy at Salesforce, Bill Patterson. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Craig. Pleasure to be with you.